welcome to today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, nationally known as the Money Lady, and committed to you, my viewers, being informed about financial issues and subjects that will allow you to make wise decisions for your family. I am so delighted to have again a guest I've had on earlier, Craig Matthews, attorney at law, who specializes in financial abuse of elders. Now, this is an explosive topic, subject. According to a recent Metropolitan Life study, they estimated over $2.6 billion is involved in losses related from financial fraud and abuse of our seniors. I can tell you as a financial specialist that recently in sitting for my anti-laundering exams under the Homeland Security, for the first time we now had a section on seniors and financial abuse, and where we are now required to keep an alert eye and ear on situations that don't look and feel right in our work in handling their funds. So that was a delightful thing for me to encounter. I was surprised, but yes, this has caught the attention even of Homeland Security. And so if you're a senior, you're going to find bank tellers, bank officers, insurance people, investment people. We are going to be looking carefully because we want to make sure you're okay. Financial predators are horrific and do more than financial damage. They actually can destroy your sense of purpose, your sense of self. So I want to cover this subject today. Please have a seat, get comfortable. We're going to be talking with Craig Matthews, again, attorney at law, here in Dayton, with offices also in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he does specialize in this field. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again,
Always.
Michelle.
Where do we want to begin?
It's hard to say where to begin. It's elder fraud is an issue that I think today is affecting so rampantly. It's in epidemic proportions. Probably everyone knows someone, either a mother-in-law or an aunt or a neighbor, that has been a victim of senior citizen or elder fraud. It's all over the place.
Are there any types of characteristics for financial fraud? Is it any particular class of people, or does it just affect everyone equally across the board?
Anyone can be a target if they're. I think if you're elderly and if it's known that you're elderly, and there's a lot of ways people can find that out, you're going to be a target. The victims that I've run across that are most effective are typically living alone. They might be a widow or a widower, and they're older to the point where their memory isn't what it used to be. They might be highly educated, they might not be. They might be very intelligent people when they were younger, but they're starting to have issues with judgment. And that is a doorway that can be used then to do all kinds of mischief.
So when you say, just as one of the possibilities, the issue of judgment, how does that play out?
Well, it's a method that is used by criminal types to identify someone that can be persuaded, easily persuaded. Typically, say an elderly person, they're living by themselves, they're lonely. I don't care how often the son or the daughter might visit, it's never enough. So they're happy to receive a telephone call or happy to have someone knock on the door, and a smiling salesperson for a so-called contracting company can end up getting to know them a little bit too well and end up perpetrating fraud. I had a case not too far from Dayton where a woman had been widowed for probably 20, 30 years.
Okay.
Living independently.
Okay.
And family, stopping in occasionally. She gets a knock on the door and answers the door, and there's a nice gentleman outside with a pickup truck, and he says, "Ma'am, I'm doing some roof repair in the area, and I couldn't help noticing when I was driving by that your roof looks like it needs work. Could you mind if I'll take a look at it, no charge."
Okay.
They had a nice little chat, and he took a look at the roof and claimed that it needed some work. So he asked for a check for a down payment. He wanted, I believe, $3,500.
$3,500.
Yeah, so she invites him into the kitchen, pulls out from the drawer her checkbook, and he watches her write the check for $3,500. And he comes back the next day, and he must have noticed something about her, because the next day he says, "Ma'am, I'm here for that $3,500 check." And she reaches into the drawer, pulls out the checkbook.
And writes him a second check.
Well, now he realizes he's into something good. By the time he was done, $52,000
$52,000, Craig?
to repair of a roof that probably didn't even need repair. The entire roof could have been done for probably less than $5,000.
My words. And in a situation like this, how did you get involved?
The family members found out what was happening. Who's this guy that's up on the roof here? What's going on here? And tell us about it. Well, he's a nice man. Don't worry about it. And well, how much is this costing? And they found out.
Right.
But by that time, the money was gone. They never saw him again.
Really?
Correct. But so they came to me. But tracing those checks, I was able to locate him.
Okay.
And we were able to recover almost all those funds. In fact, he ended up in prison.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know is there criminal possibility? I mean, can you prosecute?
There always is. Whenever fraud is involved, you have two courses. One is the civil course, and that's getting your money back. The other is the criminal course. I find, for the most part, the criminal element, the criminal side doesn't come into play that much, because the investigating officers and such often see it as, well, that's one person's word against another.
Right.
So they tend to see that as just as a family dispute or a personal dispute. However, in a case this gross, where $52,000 was charged for a roof, the police even saw there's no possible way, even though she might have voluntarily wrote the first or even the second check.
But subsequent.
Enough is enough, correct.
Yeah,
and
enough
so
is enough.
they got involved. But this was, it's rare in my experience, and I've been doing this since the 80s, it's rare for the police to get involved.
Really?
Very
With
rare.
financial abuse?
Correct.
And the reason being is because it's intra-family?
Well, it's a difficult area for the police, and they don't have that kind of training. It's one thing if someone, steals a car or breaks a window in a front door and then goes in and steals a phonograph or so. I mean, those are things that is pretty black and white. These kind of crimes often involve conning people into signing contracts.
Oh, okay.
A lot of times the crooks will come up with contracts, and so it looks like a contractual matter, and then the police say, well, that's a contract, and someone is allowed to engage in a contract, and they for whatever reason, it tends not to be actively prosecuted. It's just difficult. It's outside the
normal scope.
The normal scope of what police are
activities,
doing. Correct. You're not taking fingerprints.
Right.
It's a whole different type of an investigation. Unfortunately, I'm hoping that the police will take a more active role.
Well, I can certainly say, as I said, from my end of the spectrum, at the point that it's now a part of the anti-money laundering guidelines.
Correct.
That is significant. That just went into law. That just happened.
Well,
end
good.
of the year.
Yes.
I'm glad that happened.
Yeah, it's good to see that there are some inroads
Yeah.
into bringing alertness.
So it has to be at the point we're now being held accountable. It's got to be at an epidemic level, this thing.
It clearly is. In
Yes.
fact, this kind of legislation is behind the times, but
Yes, I'm
but
sure it is.
better now than later. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So my concern obviously on the money side is that as we enter into this really, really protracted period of recession, depression, where people are experiencing job losses and inadequate financial resources, and they're looking at mom or dad and they're seeing opportunity. Is this, what do you think? Is that, I mean, it may be speculative,
No.
but what do you think?
No, Michelle, you're right on with that. That's probably one of the most active area of my practice, and that's family members that are involved in stealing from relatives. A case I've got going right now in Cincinnati, in fact.
Okay.
This was a son. Mom was living by herself in Kentucky, and mom had a home down there that
Okay.
that she had paid for, free and clear, and she started showing signs of poor judgment, and some of her church friends were concerned.
Dementia or Alzheimer? What do you think?
It's hard to
I mean,
say.
it's
They're
hard to say.
they're
Yeah, I
so
know.
similar.
Yeah, they are
And
similar.
a lot of times you don't know until after death what the
Right.
actual diagnosis was. But a couple of her sons were far away. One son was closer by, and the closer by son drove down and told her he would help her. Well, he helped her, all right. He helped himself to her house. He sold the house. Then he used the
He
proceeds.
sold the house?
Well, he used the proceeds
Okay.
then to buy a house in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And then he moved mom into the house, which is so using her
Okay,
money, buys a
okay.
house, and then he moves his family into the house with her.
So may I ask, whose name was the house titled in?
The house was titled still a jointly house.
Okay, it was a joint
house.
Okay.
And the house was titled in such a way that upon her death, he would take it all.
Ooh,
Right.
wee.
So, you know, she's living with him for a period of time. He now has attorney, acquires a power of attorney over
Oh,
her,
God.
acquires all of her assets, and the next thing you know, he's transferring her to a nursing home,
Okay.
and he then continues to live. She dies, and all of her assets are gone. And
Wow.
so this is a case where what are the police going to do? The
Right.
police
Well, the
see
police
there's
can't do anything. That's all
there's a
legal.
power of attorney here,
Yeah, because
correct?
that's legal.
Correct.
Okay.
It's legal if you have the capacity to understand what you're signing.
Correct.
And,
Correct.
and oftentimes
Correct.
you don't.
Correct.
in
Let's
these
talk about that just as a sidebar. On this very powerful document known as a durable power of attorney,
Correct.
which I espouse, but would you please tell my viewers what it is and the good and the bad? Can you
Okay.
just take a minute and do that?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
It's called a durable general power of attorney. And each of those words have meaning. Durable means it endures over time. It endures a person if they get sick. If they sign a durable power of attorney and they later get sick or become incompetent, it endures. It's durable. It's general. Durable general power of attorney. General means that it generally applies to all financial matters. A general power of attorney, you're authorizing someone to do anything that you can do. Any place where you can sign your name on the dotted line, they can now sign your name on the dotted line. They can go to the bank, close a CD. They can call your stockbroker and sell stocks. They can sell your house. They can transfer your car. They can do anything, general. Power of attorney means you're empowering someone to be your attorney in fact, not an attorney in the professional sense, but your attorney in fact, and that means you're appointing them as an agent. So it's very powerful, and it lasts forever. Once you sign it, it lasts. I've been practicing law for 34 years. I routinely recommend durable powers of attorney for my
I
clients
do
who are
too,
coming
yes,
for estate
right,
planning.
Exactly.
And so your question is a good one. The recommendation I make is when you have someone, the client has someone that they trust implicitly, a spouse, or a trusted, mature, and financially stable child. That's important, because it's one thing to love your children, which is obviously a good thing.
Yes.
But sometimes children do not have either the emotional or the financial maturity to really make good decisions. And if the kids are in a financially desperate situation, then they can do a desperate thing. So even though it might be someone you know, like your son or your daughter, you should make sure before you give them the power of attorney that they don't really need the money, that they're financially stable themselves. I can't tell you how many cases I've had that involve family members. Well, this case I'm talking about, this was a son.
But he had a power.
He had a power of attorney.
Right. POA,
Correct.
yeah.
But he needed money. He was financially in desperate straits. And like you were talking
Jeez.
about in this economy, and he saw Mom as a kind of a lending institution.
Yeah, a bank.
Yeah, a bank that doesn't charge any
Right,
interest.
that
You
doesn't
cannot
charge
beat those
interest.
rates.
Love you forever.
Exactly, exactly. So while I still recommend durable general powers of attorney for most clients, I am more and more careful about asking them questions about the person that they want to appoint. Who is this son? Who is this daughter? Are they financially mature?
Right.
Do they
have integrity?
correct? And are they financially stable
Right,
themselves?
right.
Because it's very tempting.
Oh, I
Very
can only
tempting.
imagine. I can only imagine. People steal small money. But at the
Correct.
point you have the entire pocket bucket, there it is.
Correct. And meanwhile, you've got creditors. The son has got
Right.
creditors knocking on the door. He sees Mom's got, whatever, hundreds of thousands of dollars in an account. It's very difficult, very tempting for that person not to, I'm gonna write this check and use Mom's money to pay my bills. And Mom isn't gonna know because now she feels, oh, if someone's trusted, I'm gonna let him take care of me. Next thing you know, by the time Mom finds out, it might be too late. She might never
That
find
is
out.
such, I'm just thinking about seniors and particularly elderly, or the over 80, and how emotionally fragile they are as they age. That's one of those aging things. And to know that your child has done this to you, for
Devastating.
whatever reason,
Yeah.
nonetheless,
It's devastating.
it's devastating to the heart.
It's devastating even when it isn't a family member because they feel so foolish that they've been
Yes.
taken advantage of, like
Yes.
this roofing person.
Yes.
But you're correct, Michelle. When it's someone that you love and trusted, the emotional devastation is terrible, a terrible
Right.
thing. It's the last thing an older person needs in their elder years. They should be comfortable and feeling good about their family and what they've done.
Right.
And to be robbed by a family member is a terrible, terrible thing.
I'm just thinking of this out loud, and perhaps you can guide me and give me insight. If a person has children, would gifting them money minimize the possibility of predator behavior? If you had a significant assets, just to begin to gift them outright money?
Well, certainly, but I find that most elderly people don't want to do that
Yeah.
because during their lifetime they've accumulated
Right.
money. They're very independent,
They
and
are.
they're not used to giving all their money away. No one does that really. Very rare when someone does. It's one thing to give a Christmas present or a holiday present, or maybe if one of your children might need a loan or an advancement to buy a house or to buy a car. That's one thing. But now, one of the kids comes up to Mom or Dad and says, "Yeah, I talked to an attorney or I talked to a financial planner, and they say you should gift your kids all of your money."
Oh, yeah. Some of your money?
That ain't gonna happen.
No, that's right. I know that's right. Because they do have that disconnect. But I'm just trying to look at disincentivizing people from that. And if your children are given their inheritance early, if that would help.
Well, then, yeah, then Mom or Dad don't have the funds to be taken advantage of, but they're very reluctant to do that. I find
Really?
that that's very reluctant.
Okay, I was just curious
Yeah.
about that.
As a
because,
practical matter,
gosh,
it just goes against the grain. It goes against everything that they've known for their
Oh, I can
60, 70,
understand.
80,
Oh, yeah.
90 years.
yeah.
And all of a sudden someone is telling them, and it's one of their kids.
Right.
You know, my mom and dad are both gone now, God love them. But even though I was an attorney, practiced law for many years, I was still their kid.
You're right.
So
You're never gonna not be.
I can't
Yeah.
get out of that. So
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
give advice and such, Mom, you should do this.
Yeah.
I'm just her kid. So I find that when this comes from one of the kids, it's not well received. Now, maybe a financial advisor like yourself or an accountant might be able to
Yeah,
have some more
might.
credibility. There is a legal vehicle that is preferred. Here's a problem with gifting.
Okay.
Say mom or dad have several hundreds of thousands of dollars, where they
Right.
and they're living independently.
Right,
They might even be
right.
living by themselves, but
Right.
they need that money because they're afraid that in the future they might need a medical procedure that isn't covered. Who knows?
Who
With
knows?
healthcare
Who
up
knows? Who knows?
who knows?
Understand.
you know, or they might need long-term care.
Yes.
That's very expensive, as you
Yes,
know.
yes.
And so they're going to say, well, look, I might have a lot of money and I'm living on Social Security and my retirement and I'm not dipping into my principal, but I might need to.
Right.
I'm living independent. I might need that money down the line. So they're going to say,
Right.
and you want me to give it to you? I don't feel comfortable about that.
I appreciate this dialogue.
And the
Continue.
other problem is the kids will say, well, we'll hold this money for you. Say you have $500,000 and say there's two kids. Mom, you give each of us, write us
$250,000.
$250,000.
Okay, right.
We'll put it in a separate bank account in our name, and then we'll use those funds to take care of you. So if you do
Okay.
need an operation, I'll withdraw and Cecil will withdraw. We'll withdraw equal money and take care of you. It sounds like a brilliant plan. It sounds like a good plan, but there's a problem with that.
Okay.
And the problem is that that money now is owned by someone else and it becomes subject to their creditors.
Exactly.
So if
exactly.
son or daughter goes through a divorce, and who knows these days, all of a sudden is that asset, now they have that $250,000.
Surely.
Their spouse might say,
Sure.
I want a half of it,
Right,
that's a marital
exactly.
asset. Or they might be involved in some liability. Maybe they're in an automobile accident and insurance has declined for some strange reason. They were on vacation and didn't have time to write the premium. And now they get sued. Now mom's money,
becomes creditor.
creditor's money, and it's not there. That's the
Yeah.
problem. So the preferred vehicle there is what's called a family limited partnership. It can be done,
Okay.
but the
If there's
kids,
substantial assets involved.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
correct, that takes some planning and
Right.
thought though.
And I'm just looking at, and I appreciate your openness and transparency on this subject because I don't believe it's going to get better.
No, I don't think so.
I just don't. I'm seeing things that in 36 years I'd never seen before
Correct.
in the area of children and treachery with their parents
Correct.
and sometimes grandchildren, because now this whole thing has shifted and you may have grandchildren that are part of their life and the grandchildren are predatory.
Correct.
So I'm trying to think out loud systematically, or what can be done for an elderly person to avoid being that type of a victim. And you don't have to have large assets.
I think it's, I've been thinking about that. Your
Okay.
intuition is excellent there, Michelle. And I've given that a lot of thought. And it is a perplexing problem. What do you do? And my two parents, my dad had Alzheimer's, so I had
Okay.
personal experience with it. So I know
Oh,
what that's all
God.
about. Terrible. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And it is a big problem. I think the approach is twofold.
Okay.
One is help the older person to keep from being in diminished capacity. That has to do with exercise and nutrition. So many older people, they retire and then they end up just sitting on the couch and watching TV. And the mind, this is well documented.
Oh, it is
study
documented.
after study
Yes,
after
it
study.
is. Yes, it is.
And all of a sudden, someone who is normally intelligent and has a sharp judgment, they become docile, passive, depressed. That makes them a key victim. Encourage your parents or the older people in your circle. Come on, get out there and get active
Right.
and do. There's so many volunteer things and that are available. And seniors are excellent for these because
Yes,
they
they
grew
are.
up in a strong work ethic
Yes,
and very
yes, they are.
polite.
Yes, yes.
And you don't see that sometimes
Today.
in the
Yeah,
younger.
well, we can be open. The press.
So, and there's so many things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Keep active. Encourage mom and dad to be active. Encourage them to eat well. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of studies that are showing that what we're eating
Oh,
can
yeah.
affect our mentality.
Brains, right.
Yeah. So
Brain function.
you want to have a healthy lifestyle. Keep active, moving around, go for walks, and if you can
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
do bike rides still. So that's one aspect. Try to
And that's
help them.
assuming that you have a husband-wife situation. But as we both know, the mortality rate among men is simply
We don't last as long.
you don't
Right.
last as
Right.
long. Of course, I've always been told that thanks to women, you all don't last as long, but I won't touch that.
I don't think so.
But men do not live as long as women. So now you've got a widow, and she is probably living in the house that she was married in, or her and her husband purchased together. And how does one address it from that perspective?
It's very difficult. You can still take these approaches,
Uh-huh.
and if now it's the kid, the son or the daughter that is
Okay.
calling on mom and encouraging mom to stay active, helping mom to find volunteer organizations. At one point, mom probably just wanted to babysit the grandchildren. Now the grandchildren are in college, and now mom has no function. So encourage mom to get out and be active if she can, as long as she can still drive or people can pick her up. Encourage that activity because that's such a key, is
is.
keeping your judgment.
Right,
So important.
It is.
Now let's say for whatever reason that isn't available or it isn't working, and now you've got someone that is living alone, has some money, and they're not that alert. That is your
Wow,
prime.
there's your prime
There's your
target.
prime target. What can you do in a situation like that? It's very, very difficult because what has to happen there is someone has to watch over them. And typically, seniors are private people.
Right.
They're not the type-
interested in
I'm the- yeah.
a guard dog.
And their friends, they're telling their friends, I have,
Uh-huh.
$700,000 in the bank, or I have, $150,000 invested. They don't talk like that.
Right.
Nor should they.
Right.
So a lot of times they're particularly private with their own kids because these are their kids.
Right.
They kept their finances private from the kids. It's none of your business.
Right.
None of your what business.
Right. Exactly. They will say
They'll
that.
be mad.
They'll
They
be
will
angry.
even
Yes,
be
they
asked.
will.
So that makes it very difficult. And that's where professionals in their life come in handy. Talk to if they have a financial planner, alert the financial planner. Gee, mom isn't the same as she used to be. I just want to let you know that she might appear that way when she's talking to you for your yearly meeting or so, but let me tell you about some things. Let me give you some stories of what has happened with mom at the, like this family I was talking about in
Right.
Kentucky. They
Right.
noticed at the Thanksgiving dinner that mom had prepared flawlessly, beautifully for many, many decades. The turkey burned and the vegetables were
Right.
burnt. So they knew something was wrong.
Something was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though mom was still able to be funny and tell good stories, something's
sure,
wrong.
Sure.
So you go to the people in their life. You go to their doctor, their financial planner, their tax preparer, their lawyer, and just say, I want you to know we're concerned as a family. Put the more eyes that are on the situation, the better. And then the
That's
financial planner has to know, okay, now we're alert. Now the financial planner or the professional advisor has to, I think, step up and play a more active role in looking to see what is happening, anything unusual happening in my client or my patient's life. All of a sudden, the mom will call the accountant or the financial planner, and I want to withdraw $100,000. Well, normally, if
Yeah.
the client
yeah.
wants to do it, it's okay.
That's
my
okay,
job.
but-
Okay, here we'll go.
But
Now it's a good time to start asking some
yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good idea for these professionals to get from their patients or clients, customers, permission in writing to talk to someone. Because normally these are confidential matters.
Absolutely,
So
they are.
say you have a client that you've known many years, and all of a sudden this client does something bizarre, wants to withdraw a large amount of money, and then when you talk to him or her about it, it sounds very strange.
Oh yeah, like
but-
hostile.
But you're not allowed to.
Right.
You can't call the son.
Right, you
Because
cannot.
that's confidential.
Right,
But
it is.
if your client had given you permission to talk to one of your kids when needed in writing, that protects you.
That's very good advice. I am a certified senior advisor. I have been since 1999, which basically was just a culmination of years of doing this stuff anyway, you know, working on elder abuse. I found some paperwork going back to 1987.
It's about when I started.
Yeah,
Isn't that interesting?
yeah, I found a notebook and some other information from a conference that I had attended, Craig, at that time. Same situations, only today
More.
more.
Yeah.
More. And what is the proper response? How can a community, I know you talked about engaging the children taking an active role, but you have to know that their children in so many cases are scattered.
Correct.
They're not even in the U.S. They've got children everywhere who are living their lives, and mom is not a part of that in so many cases. So how does one address that?
And that is with, you know, bringing their professionals in their life, bringing them into the picture. I think we all need to help
I agree.
the elderly in our circle.
I agree.
The kids need to help, but you're right. Sometimes the kids they're in
Everywhere.
Portland, Oregon, or they're
Yeah.
in Paris, France,
Yeah,
or whatever. They're
I mean,
very
it's
busy,
amazing. They're gone.
all over the place, and they're
all
busy.
over- yeah,
And then these days, as you know, mom and dad, the husband and wife are working.
right.
So, you know, the mom can't even call and talk to them because they're both working.
Right.
So that makes it difficult. So that's why, as professionals, I think we need to step in, and we need to be extra alert, to ask the tough questions, including me as an attorney. I think my colleagues, before you allow your client to sign a power of attorney, make sure, does your client really understand what they're doing? And that understanding means, does my client understand what a power of attorney is, what it is, one, and two, understand that once it's given to, you know,
My goodness.
Johnny or Jimmy or Janie, that
There it is.
there it is, and can you do you have that explicit trust? And those are tough questions to
Is
ask.
it possible, as I'm thinking out loud, is it possible to do a power of attorney instrument that would be limited to specific transactions in the language? Or
It's-
does that get too muddy?
It's not really advised,
Okay,
because when the client comes in
okay,
to prepare their estate plan, they're typically competent and healthy,
yeah,
and they don't need it then. You're just doing an estate plan.
right,
And it's just like they don't really need a will, though. When they're signing the will, they're healthy, they're not going to die, but they're signing the will because they know some point down the line
they're going to
they're
need
going
it.
to die.
Yes,
That's when you
yes.
need the will. And at that time, I recommend a durable power of attorney, not because they need it now, but down the line. And we can't, you know, we don't know the future,
I know we
fortunately or
don't.
unfortunately, we just don't know the future.
Right, we don't.
So at that time, you want a general power of attorney because you don't know what kind of transactions.
Right,
That sometimes I've had powers of attorney that I drew up 10, 15 years ago. And now something's coming up.
and here it is.
And here it is. Unfortunately, I drew it up broadly, general power of attorney. It's endured. So you wouldn't want to make it that way.
Gosh, Craig,
It's
this
difficult.
is tough.
It's tough, a very tough area.
Gosh, I'm going through my mind of all the possible scenarios and alternatives and what can be done to stop the action.
And I don't think there's anything that can be done to stop it, Michelle. You can reduce the risk by helping the people be alert and helping them bring more people into their
Their
circle.
world. Okay.
And by giving permission to you as their financial planner. Here are my kids, Michelle. I've got John, Jane, and Tim. Jane lives here, John lives here, Tim lives here. Here's their telephone numbers, and I'm going to sign an authorization in your discretion. If you ever feel that you need to bring them up to speed on something that I'm doing, you have my permission to do that. That will help somewhat. And they need to have that conversation with their lawyer.
I would think so.
With their accountant.
Right, right.
And their doctor also. Get the
Okay.
doctor so that the doctor can discuss.
Because HIPAA, that gets really muddy.
Yes, correct.
I mean, they won't talk to a third party
No,
about
and that's terrible.
anything.
Correct.
I mean, I just went through a situation with my mother on a Medicare, and you better believe I finally told her, you're going to sit in the office with me, and we're going to put you on a speakerphone, and you're going to tell them that I can talk to them so we can get this settled.
Communicate, yes.
Because their position was, no way.
Yes.
Everything
is so isolated.
Everything is
Yeah.
so isolated and agency specific. So in their quest to protect privacy, and I respect privacy issues.
Of course.
I think that's given. But I do feel that particularly when you're dealing with elderly, over 80, things change. And someone has to be in a position to
help.
Yes. Right? We don't have 3 weeks to work this out.
No.
We really have to get with it. So let me ask you on the subject, since it does appear to be, and I shouldn't say that because I am going to talk to you about it, so I don't want to forget the thought. Since it does seem to be very family-based, who initiates the action in the event of financial abuse? Who recognizes it and who says, halt, stop, something's not right?
Interestingly, I've been retained both by the victim, who has come to their senses and realized, oh my goodness, what did I just do?
Yes.
I have a case where the victim was victimized by a nephew that lived far away, many states away. Gave the power of attorney to the nephew as the trusted family member, didn't have her own kids, and didn't want to give it to the local nieces and nephews.
Had no children of her own or his
Had
own?
no children of her own.
No children, okay.
Correct. So gave it to this trusted nephew, and I guess the nephew was most trusted because he was the farthest away and didn't have the close associations. And of course, with the daily with the local people, you get into little tips and flaps and such.
Exactly.
And this guy, she only saw once a year at Thanksgiving, so she didn't know anything other than that. And he took all her money, came for Thanksgiving, and emptied her bank accounts.
Oh God!
Just emptied her bank accounts. She went to the bank to write a check, and the teller says, "Well, ma'am, that account's closed." My account is closed. What are you talking about? It got into argument at the bank. Thought the teller.
Goodness gracious!
Thought the teller was involved in some type of fraud.
Yes.
And it says, "No, ma'am, this account was closed," and showed her that her
He
nephew,
did it.
using a power of attorney, and then she knew that she had been victimized.
Oh.
And then calls him up, and he refuses to give. Oh no, I'm taking care of this for you. No, I don't want you taking care of this. That's not what I meant. I didn't mean that when I gave you the power of attorney.
Give me my money
He won't
back.
He won't give it back.
He would not give her
Won't
money
give it
back.
So then she talked to a friend. What can I do? He said, you need to see an attorney. And this person knew me, and I got the money back and jewelry
Well, good
back.
for you.
Yeah.
That's good.
That was a good
What did you
outcome.
have to do? Did you
Sue.
mediate, or you had to sue?
Had to sue. I
You
wrote a
had
letter.
to sue.
I wrote a letter saying, give this, been retained by this person. This is what you did. We have records of this. Give this money back
Or go to jail.
within 7 days, or we will seek the full repercussion of the law.
Absolutely.
Correct.
My God, I know
So-
she had to have gone through some emotional angst about this.
And that's
though.
what you
I
were talking
mean,
about earlier, Michelle. It
goodness.
was terrible, terrible,
Ah,
terrible. She really never recovered from that. It was
she got her
so-
money back, but her heart was broken.
Correct. She never recovered.
Mm.
She never recovered. It's sad.
I don't, as I look out, and as I've said to you before camera time, you see a lot, and it makes you begin to really wonder about people. And one of the thoughts I have is that maybe there's some validity to the children not knowing what kind of money you have, and maybe retaining an attorney who is a third party to operate as your trusted advisor. How does that play out, or is that perceived as a potential conflict?
That's not necessarily a conflict.
Okay.
I don't get involved in that very often because it's not really my role as a counselor and an attorney. I usually try to find a family member or a trusted family member or a trusted, possibly a close friend to take over. Although on some instances I will do that as a last resort if there is no one else that's available.
Okay.
Monies can be put into trust. There's things that can be done.
Okay.
There's things that can be done, but what you have to do is convince the elderly person that something radical needs to be done. Like you were saying earlier, writing the big check to the kids. Of course, I talked about why that might be a problem.
Right.
But regardless of why it might be a problem, a lot of times you just can't get off first base on that because mom or dad says, I am not going to be giving my hard-earned money away to my kids.
Yeah,
Correct.
I got it. I mean, I really got it. But I'm just thinking out loud, just as maybe an academic discussion, what about the creation of a trust with a designated person as a trustee?
A trustee, certainly. That's a common, I call it a revocable living trust.
Right.
It's a living trust you created while you're alive. It's revocable, you can revoke it at any time. And you can take money from your bank account and put it into the trust. A trust is kind of like I use the metaphor, a cardboard box.
Yes.
You build a box, it's a trust. It's an empty box, and then you put things into that box. So you put your bank account, your stock account, even your deed to your house can be put into that trust. And you designate a trustee, and only that trustee can take things out of that box.
Right.
And if your trustee is a trusted person that's not going to abuse it.
Family member, perhaps.
Correct.
I've seen
That's
that a lot.
that's one way to get the money out of the hands of someone that really shouldn't be managing all that money, but it's still held for that benefit because the box, the instructions on the box say everything in this box can only be used
Right.
for the benefit of Mrs. X. It may not be used for any other purpose.
I think that's nice, though.
Yes.
I like that.
And a lot of times
like that.
the older client they're okay with that.
But they're abandoning their ability to control their assets, though, under that trust scenario.
That's correct.
Correct?
That's
so they
correct.
can't write checks.
Correct.
Because a trustee is empowered to do that. They can't pay bills. So there is some level of loss of control.
Exactly, and they don't like that.
And they don't like that.
And what the families do in a situation like that is maybe let mom or dad keep a checking account with $5,000 or $10,000
In their own name.
so that they can still go to the grocery store, go shopping, and buy a new pair of shoes or whatever.
Because I can
they
see
have that
them being
independence.
frustrated with that as well. But it seems to me that that may have more benefit than not.
It's a good technique
Okay.
in many instances.
Okay.
And so mom or dad can still feel that they have the power to buy things because they don't need to dip into their principal. When
Right.
they're 80 years
Right.
old or
Right.
90s, they don't need to dip. They shouldn't by that time need to dip into their principal.
Right.
They just want it to buy the things that they need, and so that's a nice solution there. So they have access to maybe $5,000 or $10,000. Stolen, it's $5,000 or $10,000.
It's not $1 million.
Correct. They're not going to lose
mean,
their life savings.
Yeah, that to
Correct.
me is what is so horribly offensive as I look at this whole matter. Let's talk about when you talk about trusted advisors, and it comes to mind again about your involvement with a situation that did get widespread publicity with a bank, where a bank branch manager of a very large bank took advantage of a couple.
Correct.
And that was a horrific
Correct.
story.
Correct. And that is a situation that is, it was in the front page of the Dayton Daily News, I think, in two issues.
Yes. I went back and read it, and I couldn't believe it. It was
Yes.
so horrible.
Yes, a very bad situation there. And I'm not at liberty to talk of that case was resolved.
Okay. Wasn't it resolved in favor of your client?
I'm not allowed
Okay,
because
I
of
got
the,
you.
of the
I understand.
confidentiality
Okay.
agreement to discuss that.
Okay.
Suffice to say, this is what I do.
Okay.
And I entered into a settlement agreement that, in my judgment,
Was fair.
was a good settlement agreement. Yes.
But how does one even moving forward, because that did occur, which means it can occur again. And it may not occur in that specific institution, but what safeguards are in place to prevent that type of thing from occurring?
There's none. That is a
There are no
that is-
safeguards. Oh my goodness.
That is a situation when someone is very clever and engages in conduct that involves, if you look at there's allegations that are public
Right,
in this matter
right,
that are beyond
right.
my settlement agreement. People can go online to the court site, and some of these
Right.
were published in the newspaper, where you have allegations of,
The
of
accounts, Craig.
forgeries. And
Yes.
there's no way to prevent. That's like trying to prevent someone from, if you're in New York City, coming up to you with a gun and robbing you.
Kapow, yeah.
There's nothing you can do about stuff like that.
Because it just seems to me when you look at our side of the business and banking and insurance and those industries that are dealing with people's trust, confidence, and money. And then you have an elderly person.
When they're victimized by the professional, here is the
Exactly.
bank manager, correct?
Exactly. That I found to be extremely
Right.
disturbing. But to her credit, the daughter was sharp.
Correct.
And
The
it's
daughter
back
was
to
sharp.
that family.
That's what I was saying.
Back to that
Back to
family
the
again. The
family.
daughter was sharp.
Keeping an eye. And this is a situation where mom didn't want to share her
Yeah.
information. She's
Yeah.
very private. But it just red lights were going off in this daughter's mind. This isn't right. And why is this banker at the
But
house?
kudos to her, the daughter.
Yes.
Because I still feel that within the family, elders must identify someone in their family that they can trust or someone that loves them, whether it be church or personal relationships, but they have to find a person that they feel, even pastors. I know pastors probably say, I don't want to do this, I got enough troubles. But it would seem to me that that would be an area as well, because so many of them still go to church.
Correct.
They do.
Correct.
They're at church on Sundays.
Bring these older people need to bring trusted people into their circle. They have to, if they want to avoid being victimized, they need to, you've got a competing interest here. On the one
Okay.
hand, privacy.
Right.
My money is in my business, and it's no one else's business. And I'll tell my, maybe my stockbroker, but that's the only person that's going to know. And if you do that, there's a chance that you can be victimized because someone finds out that you've got a stock account, and next thing you
Right.
know, the stockbroker gets a call, sell my 250 shares of
Right.
whatever,
Right.
and you can't do anything because you've been ordered to sell the shares. You have no
Right,
power. You
right.
could even say, that doesn't sound like a good idea, and they could say, I don't care what you sell.
Right, right.
Sell it right now.
Right.
You have
right,
to.
Right.
And if you're the only person that knows that, there's nothing that you can do. So someone that has that level of privacy is going to be in the category of a possible
Wow.
exploited victim. So on the other hand, bring people into your circle
Okay.
as necessary so that someone else knows what's going on.
I think that's important.
That's important.
Somebody else has to know
Correct. Right.
your life.
Correct. And if it's, the most difficult situations, Michelle, are when the person is living by themselves. They're a widow or a
Yes.
widower.
Yes.
And they relied upon their loving spouse to kind of
Right.
you watch over
Right.
each other.
Right.
You work as a team.
Right.
Suddenly that team is gone. And that is almost all the cases that I've been involved in involved a situation where they were living by themselves like that.
Okay. Widow or widower, or
Correct.
was it a propensity one way or the other?
I'd probably slightly more widows, I'd say, because women tend to live longer.
Yes, they do.
Just
yes,
statistically.
They do. Yes, they do.
I think for that sole reason.
Yes,
So
they
they're
do.
living by themselves because their husband had died of a heart attack or whatever. And that's, you know, and during their lifetime, they watched out for each other. You watched the others
did.
back.
The World War II generation.
Correct.
They went to war. They went to work. They raised their families, and they honored the covenant of marriage.
And if he would do something kind of dumb, she would be
She
after
would
him.
be after him, and
vice versa.
Yes,
Correct.
vice versa.
But once it's done, then the person who survives has to realize, I need to bring someone else into my life. There's never going to be anyone, of course, like their
That's
spouse.
right.
But that's when, you know, is there one of the kids that is financially mature and financially stable to help watch over?
And parents do know.
Sure they do.
They know.
Yeah.
They know if Billy is a boozer.
And a lot of times, the parent in my estate planning, a lot of times the parent, the one that they're closest to, isn't necessarily the best person to watch the money.
I believe it. I believe it.
A lot of times the person to watch the money might not be so affectionate and you don't have that emotional bond, but they might be better about watching over money. Yeah.
That's interesting because my son lives in Florida, and he's went to college for business administration and grew up looking at how I ran my business and stuff. And we had a disputing about money the other day, and he quoted me so cripply that I had to just say, oh my God. He said, Mom, he said, a want is not a need. And he said, you're talking to me about a want, and I'm talking to you about a need. Now you need to get with it. And I kind of had to step back because I was like, I did raise you like this. He said, yes, you did.
Words of wisdom.
Yes, coming back to me was surprising, but it let me kind of know that that was a path that he was on in terms of financial maturity. And I respected that when he said, no, you know, we're not going to deal with wants, we're going to deal with needs. And I liked that.
Right.
It kind of took me aback, but I can understand when, as you look at older individuals, how this works. Listen, let's go through these really quickly because
Okay, sure.
time is wrapping up, and I'm going to ask you to summarize these and also let people know where they can, if they want to get a copy of this, can you, I'm going to read this out to you all, in the viewers. Elder fraud and financial abuse is on the rise. Here are 10 tips to help avoid becoming a victim by Craig Matthews, Esquire. And if you'd like a copy of this, you can visit him at C. Matthews at ctmlaw.com, or you can go to his website at www.ctmlaw.com, or you can call him 937-434-9393. He also has an elder fraud blog at http://ctmlaw.tumblr.com. So I would strongly, because we're going to whiz through this, but this is an excellent little fact sheet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, something that I drew up is 10 tips.
Yes, if you could whiz through those for me real quick.
Well, the first is to avoid providing personal financial information over the phone or on the internet. There's so many scams.
Isn't that the
It's
truth?
just amazing.
Yes, it is
You know,
amazing.
please verify your account with Verizon by providing your Social Security number. And some people think it looks
It looks like Verizon.
because they're very clever. They
yes,
they can recreate the
yes.
logo and the colors and
Yes.
everything, and you think you're getting a legitimate, and you're not.
You're somewhere in Africa or Russia.
So,
Yeah.
and if you have any doubt, you know, get on the telephone and call.
Okay.
I just got an email. Is it from
Is that
Verizon?
legit?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty.
Don't speak at length with people who are unfamiliar to you. This is what I was talking about with the first story that I told.
Okay.
The lady that opens the door and invites into her
Right.
kitchen a flim-flam artist that ends up taking $52,000. Overly familiar. If they're at the door, I've got other cases that involve that kind of a situation.
Okay.
They're salesmen or they're crooks,
Okay.
and you don't bring them into your house. Don't show them.
Okay. All righty.
Don't sign any documents without reviewing them carefully. So many times people are asked, elderly people are asked to sign a document. It could be a power of attorney, and they don't even know that they're signing a power of attorney. So get someone to check in on that. There's all kinds of claims. The fourth point has to do with these industry claims. Home improvement, we talked a little bit about that.
Right, we did.
Be extra careful. You know, ask someone, ask a
Right,
neighbor or a friend or
right.
family, do I really need this new roof, or do I need this, you know,
Right.
this patio? Reach out for help before investing or spending considerable amounts of money. That has to do with your business.
Yes,
here.
it does.
You know, you
And
need a
proceeding
financial
with
planner
care.
in your life. You
Well,
need one.
We have 5 other areas that need to be covered, but we've run out of time.
Okay.
And I'm going to say again, I'm going to encourage all of my viewers. We've had an awesome time with Mr. Matthews. 36 years in the practice of elder fraud and financial abuse. I give him 5 stars. You can check him out yourself by, again, visiting his website, www.c as in cat, T as in Tom, M as in Mary.com, or calling his office at 937-434-9393. This is an explosive situation. I hope you've gotten more insight as to the challenges that are before our elders. And by all means, if you're blessed to have elderly people in your life, cherish them and love them and treat them with respect, honor, and dignity. I'm closing out today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm your host, Michelle Graves, as always, telling you to have a God-blessed day. And I look forward to seeing you on our next show. Take care.